wears you out. The CNN article quoting a Missouri man describing the flooding of the past several days. 12.1 million Americans are currently under flood warnings at this moment. And I'm sure this was not what many like this Missouri man had anticipated, closing out 2015 and beginning 2016. The psalmist talks about God in Psalm 18, verse 16, who reached down from on high and took hold of me and drew me out of deep waters. God is talking about deep waters that threaten our lives when we experience troubles and turmoil. I don't know, but so many today seem to float along. They seem to float along through life with the sense that everything is safe, everything is stable, unaware that there are dangers that lie beneath them as they float through life. But ever so often, many times, in an instant, as those in our Midwest have recently discovered, things can change. Slowly, what we were trusting to keep us afloat begins to sink, or the waves get too high, or we lose balance and we fall off. The winds of change, they can so easily blow us from our shores of safety and stability out into deep and dangerous waters. And especially, this happens in this rapidly changing world. I think you'd all agree, if you look at your childhood till now, things seem to change so radically, quickly. How do I know that? Let's just look back 100 years ago. 100 years ago, your family's going to get together, a couple generations. Look back if David and Linda were to talk to their parents or grandparents. What was their life like? Well, let's say 100 years ago, the average life expectancy was 47. 47. Average. Only 14% of homes in the U.S. had a bathtub. It's true. Only 8% of homes had a telephone. And if you did have one and you wanted to make a call from Denver to New York, it cost you $11. And that was big money then. There are only 8,000 cars in the U.S. and only 144 miles of paved roads. The maximum speed limit in most cities was 10 miles an hour, 100 years ago. And you might be surprised that Alabama, Mississippi, Iowa, and Tennessee were more heavily populated than California. California was the 21st most populous state in the Union. At that time, the tallest structure in the world was, any guesses? Got it. You know what the average wage was 100 years ago? 22 cents an hour. And the average U.S. worker made between $200 and $400 a year. But if you were an accountant, you can make as much as $2,000 a year. A dentist, up to $2,500. And if you were a veterinarian, they were important then. They made anywhere from $1,500 to $4,000 a year. Mechanical engineer, they're the ones that made the big bucks, $5 grand a year. And did you know that most births took place in the home? 95% of births took place in home at that time. So many other stats. 90% of all U.S. physicians had no college education. Sugar cost 4 cents a pound. Eggs were 14 cents a dozen. Coffee was 5 cents a pound. Now, women, you only wash your hair once a month. And you use borax or egg yolks for shampoo. Canada was unique. They passed a law prohibiting poor people from entering their country. What do you think the 5 leading causes of death were 100 years ago? What do you think the number 1 cause of death? Huh?
Influenza?
Flu. The flu. Flu or pneumonia. Second was TB or tuberculosis. Third was diarrhea. Fourth was heart disease. 5 was stroke. Not cancer, not AIDS. At that time, there were only 45 states. There were drive-by shootings then. Yeah, those did exist then. They were a little bit different, though. They consisted of teenage boys who would gallop down the street on horses, and they would shoot anything randomly, carriages, houses, anything that they felt like. The population of Vegas at that time was 30. Plutonium, insulin, antibiotics hadn't been discovered yet. There was no Scotch tape, no crossword puzzles. Iced tea hadn't been invented. There was no Father's Day, Mother's Day. Only 1 in 10 U.S. adults could read or write. Only 6% had graduated from high school. Marijuana, heroin, and morphine were all available over the counter. You go to the drugstore and buy heroin, marijuana, and morphine. According to one pharmacist, heroin clears the complexion, gives buoyancy to the mind, regulates the stomach and the bowels, and is in fact a perfect guardian of health. 100 years ago. Didn't know that, did you? Did you know Coca-Cola, you know this, contained cocaine? But what's really surprising me is they actually had punch cards there. Punch card data. It was at the beginning of the computers. Did exist at that time. And they were the early predecessors, like I said, the modern computer. And it was first used for the first time in the government to compile the 1900 census. This is also interesting too. 18% of households in the United States had at least 1 full-time servant or domestic. Had somebody cleaning your house or working in your house. So there's some stats of just 100 years ago. Has our world changed? Are you kidding me? Many of us honestly live each day uncertain. You do. You live uncertain about your health, about your jobs, about how you're going to keep financially afloat. Maybe you're on a fixed income. You're feeling insecure about the unstable economy. Maybe this past year you've lost a loved one. Family and friends have gone through divorces, sudden illnesses, not to mention the political climate and transition that we are facing in our country, along with the daily threat that Islam poses to our security and way of life. It's understandable. It would really be understandable if you're facing 2016 with a bit of apprehension. And we may wonder what sudden or unexpected wave of circumstance may potentially wash us out into deep water. And what we worry about possibly taking us under. So when the rains come, or when the rains came, I should say, no one in Missouri or surrounding areas really dwelled on the possibility that the end result was going to be the devastating floods that they're experiencing right now. It was just raining. They never thought it would come to that initially. Most are preoccupied, as you and I are every day. We're preoccupied with another day at work, another day at school, another day of dealing with our lives. They were preoccupied with shopping, with family, and plans for New Year's. And when we are hit with something, we're preoccupied. We never see it coming. We never see it coming. So if life 100 years ago seems tragically slow and simple, imagine what the pace of life was 4,300 years ago. And simple as slow as times were then, our opening parashah in the book of Shemot or Exodus, depicts a very pivotal time of change in the history of Bnei Israel. See, we move from the time of the patriarchs to that of the Exodus and the subsequent entry into the Promised Land. There's also a massive change in the lives of the people. They had been experiencing up to this time prosperity and freedom. Not in the land that God had chosen for them, no, but in the land of Egypt. But this was going to change overnight. And as we examine the frightening changes that they faced and how they responded to these changes, we're given direction and hope for the known and unknown changes that each of us face on a daily basis. God had promised Abraham. He had promised Abraham the people of Israel their own land of Canaan or Canaan. They had come to Egypt in order to escape the famine of their own land. Joseph had been sold as a slave by his brothers. We talked about that, but he ended up resurrected out of the pit and into the palace, becoming Pharaoh's right-hand man, second in command of all the known world. He ruled Egypt and saved it from the effects of a famine by having Egypt store up grain. You know the story. Yaakov and his 11 other sons came to Joseph in Egypt and settled in the land of Goshen, where they acquired property there and were fruitful. And they increased greatly in number. But before he died, Joseph told his sons that God would surely come and take them out of Egypt and into the land that he had promised to his great-grandfather Abraham. And he made them swear an oath that they would return to this land. And I wonder as time went by, that maybe they kind of forgot this promise, forgot this oath that they had made. So we also find it easy to forget promises. Promises that we made to God, promises that we made to each other. Did I promise them? Did I say that? After all, things were good for them in Egypt. Why should we leave? In Exodus 12:40, we read that they stayed in Egypt for 430 years. More than 400 of those years were good. They were good years. But things were about to change, and I wonder if these changes were necessary to draw them back to their own land and to make them keep the oath that they had made to Yaakov. In verse 8, we read that a new king came to power in Egypt, and this Pharaoh was probably Ramses II, who started a new dynasty. It was not related to those who ruled before him. He did not either care or know what Joseph had done for Egypt. It didn't matter to him. Instead of seeing the people of Israel as his friends, no, he saw them now as a threat. They were prosperous. And he worried that perhaps one day they might become so powerful that he might become allies with his enemies. So, they lived in an area through which their enemies would probably attack from. And so, because of his fears, the Pharaoh does three things. First, he took away freedom. He took away the freedom that Israelites had. That's what happens in every culture. You start to erode the liberties. That's how you attack the people. And that's what Pharaoh, he read from that playbook. He put masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. He made them build cities in which large granaries were built to store grain for trade and to feed the armies of Egypt. He hoped to weaken the physical strength of the people and crush their spirit. That's what the enemy wants to do, brothers and sisters, is he wants to crush your spirit. And certainly it would stop their increase in numbers, right? If you crush their spirit, if you discourage the people, then there should be a decrease in numbers, right? That's how it works, right? Well, that was a theory. But that's not what happened. Instead of being crushed, the people grew stronger. The people increased in numbers. And as a result, he forced them to make bricks and work the land. But the more the enemy oppresses, the more there is growth. The more the enemy oppresses, the more that there is growth. Growth in the person, growth in the community. And why does that happen? Well, first of all, when you try to oppress the people who have a strong sense of purpose, what happens? They become even more determined. If you push on me, I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back even harder. They dig in their heels. And even if they cannot fight back directly, they become determined not to break. I was sick, obviously, and still am, for days. Went home from work early, just couldn't handle it. So, of course, in 24 hours, I watched 6 Rocky DVDs. Well, I just turned on the TV. It was like Rocky 1, and it just, I got sucked in. And probably, and I'm going to tell you this, well, everybody's seen the Rocky, but the best Rocky is the last one, Rocky Balboa. It's the best one. I'm telling you, if you've not seen it, well, you've got to see it. You've got to see it. Because there's like I said, there's a scene in there between Rocky and his grown son that is precious. And it is important that you see that. Because Rocky is challenged basically by his son at his age. That, he's becoming an embarrassment, a big shadow. And he's basically tells his son that life isn't whether you're going to get knocked down, you are. Life is about how quickly you're going to get back up. How many times you keep getting back up and keep pressing on. And Rocky knew that, being knocked down the ring many a time. But he kept getting back up. And that's why he was impossible to defeat. Because he was determined. No matter how many times he's knocked down, he's going to get back up. And you know the song, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Now you're probably singing it in your head for the rest of the show. But adversity can draw us to God and give us spiritual toughness and enables us to face deep waters through God. And secondly, they were God's chosen people, and God strengthens his people. If you're truly God's people, he will strengthen you. And we see this when we look back at the terrible oppression that many people in Eastern Europe suffered for many decades. In Romania, for example, 1/3 of the people were believed to be informants for the government. And the people were forced to live with little food and heat so that the Ceausescu could build his palace. Their life was so poor that the people willingly died for freedom. Also, their faith remained and grew even though they were not allowed to worship God. So if we look back at some difficult times in our lives, we can see how we grew in character and closer to God. Look at the hard times you've gone through. Come on. Look at those times. Did it not draw you near to the Lord? Of course, the other thing I watched, it probably gives you sort of an interesting insight into, who I am. The other thing I watched after the Rocky videos is I like to watch why planes crash. And so I was watching this one lady was talking about about 20 years ago, a crash that occurred down south, I think it was in Georgia. And it was quoting a flight attendant who survived this crash. When you're flying in a jet, you lose, I don't know if you know anything about flying, but small planes, they're basically gliders with motors, But jets depend upon those motors. They are designed, streamlined, so they go fast through the air. So when the motors drop out, well, You know, you got numerous expressions to describe what happens if that happens. Basically, they drop like rocks. And so this one lost both motors in a hailstorm. And the lady described it how it crashed. She goes, yeah, she goes, there's a whole lot of praying going on in that airplane before it hit ground. She goes, it's amazing how situations like that, you draw real fast, real near to the Lord. Isn't that true? You know, when you're in trouble, you don't go, oh, Satan! Oh, God! Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny how that happens? Yeah. Look at the difficult times in your lives. So, of course, what happened to Pharaoh's first plan? Well, it didn't work. Failed. So, Pharaoh decides to come up with a new plan. The second plan, he called upon the Hebrew wives, midwives I should say, and told them to kill all the male babies that were being born. This would slowly exterminate them and leave only the weaker female slaves. That was, the theory. To be called before Pharaoh must have brought fear to Shifra and Puah. But their fear of Pharaoh is not as great as their fear of God. They would not only do this, they would not do this terrible thing they were asked to do, and as a result, God blessed them as midwives for not killing the babies. And God blessed them with children of their own. So the second plan failed. Why? Because the people of God feared and obeyed him. Feared and obeyed him. We live in a world in which we often need to make choices. Often need to make choices. There's an elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is we came to a place as a congregation where some choices had to be made. Okay? We make choices between worldly ways and ways of the Word. Choices were made. The hardest thing, though, is to be in a group of people who want us to do something wrong or promote something that's wrong, especially when they are good, well-intentioned people who are simply wrong. And it's easy to go along with them just as one time, but God will understand. God understands my heart. God will roll with it. And God does forgive us when we are genuinely sorry for our bad choices. But we still reap the consequences. If I go out there and I didn't know that I was breaking the law, I'm still accountable to breaking the law. The police are going to go, I'm sorry you didn't know that. Here. I'm sorry you didn't know that. Sorry you didn't see that. You're still accountable. You're accountable for the choices that you make, right or wrong. It might reveal to us that we truly have not trusted God and put our faith wholly in Him. And we will miss out enjoying the blessings of following His ways just as the midwives did. Pharaoh was not ready to give up. Hasatan is never done. He doesn't give up. He is relentless. However, Pharaoh had another plan. For his third plan, he had to get rid of the Hebrew males. So then he ordered that every boy that was born had to be thrown into the Nile River. How many babies died this way? We do not know. This leads us to the story of the birth of Moshe. And as we read about his birth, God is not mentioned, but He is there caring for Moshe, just as in our lives He watches over us even when we do not think of Him. And we all know the story of Moshe. It's a favorite, Shabbat school. The Levi'im woman gives birth to a son. And she saw the son was, and it's very important this word in Hebrew, and from our portion today, she saw the sun was fine. Interesting description of Moshe. He was fine. Actually, this expression in Hebrew meant that his beauty was seen as a peculiar token of divine approval, and a sign that God had a special design or plan for him in his life. She hid him for 3 months, but as we're hearing in the back there, perhaps his crying grew loud, and she could no longer hide him. So she made a tiny ark, a papyrus basket coated with tar and pitch so it would not sink. And she placed the baby in the tavah, or ark, and placed him among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. Interesting, the word tavah is used only one other time in the Torah. Can anybody guess where it is? Bingo! 2 times that word is used. The Ark of Noah. Both arks are what? Thank you. Vessels of salvation, vessels of deliverance. Pharaoh's daughter came by, and when she saw the basket and the baby, she felt sorry. Moshe's sister had been hiding and watching. She went to Pharaoh's daughter and asked later on if she could get a Hebrew woman to wean the child. Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and she got her mother, who ended up weaning her own son, and got paid for it. Not bad. A lot of you mothers are thinking, hey, wait, there's some cash involved in this? I didn't get that. But you may be surprised, if you look throughout Scripture, how often Hashem uses those in rebellion against him to fulfill his purposes. When the boy was weaned, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. 2 times the mother gave up her son. First to the Nile River, and then at age 2 to Pharaoh's daughter. The second time had to have been the hardest. But she knew she was really giving up her son into God's hands and trusted that he would look after him. So we too need to give it up. You got to give up your situations to God. You've got to trust him. To give him control over the people or things that mean the most to you. And nobody says it's easy. It's not. 36 hours, David and Linda are going to say goodbye to the family. That situation will probably never happen again. And they have to release them, trusting that what they had imparted in raising them and their faith in Hashem will go with their families, their extended families, their offspring. And it's not an easy thing to do. We have seen how to respond to adversity, to fear God rather than humankind, to trust God. What we see here is how God takes the very things that are against him and his people, and he uses them for good, brothers and sisters. Don't look at the negative. Look at the positive, the good things that resulted out from the trials and the turmoils and the struggles. And so, the third plan by Pharaoh backfired. The river which was to become a river of death, what happens? It becomes a river of life for Moshe. And who would have known that this baby would years later be used by God to bring freedom and life to all the Bnei Israel? Pharaoh tried to exterminate the Jews, and his daughter gave them life. What an irony. What an irony. When Pharaoh was planning to exterminate them, God was preparing to emancipate them. It was very, very murderous edict by Pharaoh that led to the training and the preparation of the human deliverer of Israel. In Acts 7:22, Stephen said that Moshe was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action By being in the king's court, Moshe learned much that he would later use to lead the people out of Israel. Pharaoh trained him to be a deliverer. What an amazing irony. What an amazing turn of events. And as we said, the very things against us can be used by God to be for us. When you're facing an obstacle or difficulty, try to look at it as, how is this going to be used for me? How is this going to be turned for me? Because that's what God does. God's hand is in all things, brothers and sisters. Don't ever stop thinking that. Don't dismiss that reality carelessly. At the time of tribulation, we may not understand it. But often we can see this later when we look back. We can also see that God is true to his promises. He was taking the first steps in leading the people back to the promised land. What is so awesome is how Hashem does not change and how his plans are so consistent. In our portion is rich with symbolism. And symbolism is something that the Hebrew mind appreciates so much more than us. They had time in those days to reflect on these symbols. Perhaps all the more reason for us to spend a little more time in reflection. You know, I do that. I'm not bragging. But in my own walk, I look at the symbolism. I reflect upon how things, have evolved and how God's hand had worked through situations and circumstances and the irony of situations and how they turned out. And we overlook that richness of God's presence in all your circumstances. You overlook that when you don't sit back and really try to reflect on it. The story of Moshe being in the water, then being rescued, reminds us of God rescuing his people out of the water and by water. It reminds us of a much larger basket of Tavah, the ark, which gave life to Noah and his family because Noah had remained faithful to God. And later the Reed Sea would be a body of water used to rescue Bnei Israel and destroy the army of Egypt. It was by this helpless baby that came out of the Nile that God would save his people. And later it was by a helpless baby born in Bethlehem who was baptized and came out of the Jordan that God would save his people from their sins. It is this water of the mikvah that is used to immerse or baptize to signify symbolically by going into and out of the water that we are rescued from death and cleansed of our sin. The same God, brothers and sisters, who rescued the people of Israel, that's our God. It's our God. And his plan for this world includes you and me. And nothing is going to change God's plan. Nothing. No matter what tool Hasatan is pulling out of his tool chest, today or tomorrow or the next day, it doesn't make any difference. God's will be done on earth as in heaven. Nothing's going to change. And perhaps you're going through or facing some changes in your life. Perhaps the world seems to be moving by too fast. Perhaps the waters around you seem so deep, so threatening. Maybe some calamity is stirring some things up in your life. And you fear being swept away by a flood of challenges. Look, maybe you're apprehensive about 2016. Maybe you are. When I look back just at the High Holy Days, look how much apprehension was expressed then. Everybody wanted to be yanked out of here. People were bouncing off the walls, believing in a rapture. The whole spirit of that represents apprehension. speaks of, I want to escape, I want to get away. That's a sign that many of us are apprehensive about the days to come. And, well, maybe it'll help you to hold on to this truth. And that truth is, and I think you know, just like that man in Missouri knows, life will wear us out. It will. It's tough. It will wear us out at times. No doubt about it. I'm a little worn out, obviously. But remember, we are still in God's tava. We're in God's hands. He holds us. And He will rescue us from whatever deep waters that you feel threatened by. Any deep waters that will threaten His purposes and threaten His people. You can depend upon that. So rise up. Well, Father, in Yeshua's name, as we bow our heads, so often, Lord, as people in our Midwest are experiencing what seems like just a little bit of rain ends up being a flood, trials and struggles. Lord, we often just put the umbrella up and think that'll take care of it. Sometimes, Father, difficulties and problems come rushing in like a flood. And it's so hard for us to hold on. We feel almost caught up and swept away. Father, I'm praying in Yeshua's name, Lord, that this year, 2016, that we would have a sense of your deliverance, your salvation. So I would pray, Father, that each one of us would know that tava in our life, the place of security, of being gathered up, Father, and protected. And no matter what floods come, no matter what comes our way to sweep us away, or at least attempt to sweep us away, or wash away, Father, our faith and our hope in you, Father, that you'll gently lift us into this place of safety. And Lord, I know that the waters will recede, and things will eventually, Father, be dry and sunny again. Father, your will be done. So, Father, just as Pharaoh's plan fails, so does Hasatan's. Your purposes will be fulfilled. Your purposes for us. And we thank you, Father. We thank you, Father, that we can find security and hope in that. And I rebuke that apprehension for 2016. And the Father, that what wears us out, Father, will give us new strength and resolve. Father, we will draw upon that and be stronger than we ever have been in our walk with you. Hashem Yeshua Adonai. The congregation says, Amen. Amen. Yivrek Yahweh v'yishmarecha, Adonai panav alecha v'yichanei.